This is going to be a first for the Thought Road podcast. We're going to have the same guest on 2 episodes.
So this week will be part 1, and next week we will have part 2.
You know, there were so many interesting topics that we discussed with this guest, and we're excited to share them with you.
Yes, very enlightening for everyone who is creative.
Hi, everyone. Hope you've been having a wonderfully creative week. I'm Rod Jones, and we celebrate what people love to do creatively by giving them a voice so you can learn from their life's experiences, and we learn from them too.
Yes, and I'm Angie Jones. Welcome to Thought Road Podcast. We invite you to subscribe wherever you listen, and we focus on sharing with everyone how they can think, be, and live more creatively with their own passions.
Okay, so tell us who our guest is today.
Well, our guest today is Dion Wilson. He's the founder of Raster Technologies and founder of Titanium Comics. He discusses his journey from reading lots of comic books as a child all the way to building and protecting comic book assets.
You know, I know Dion is very successful, but I also know it's because he's not afraid of hard work. There's something to be said about that. And I bet you have a quote that will be very motivating for us today. I suspect so.
Yes, I do. So here's our quote for this episode. And it goes like this. Some people want it to happen. Some wish it would happen. And others make it happen. And that is by Michael Jordan, a very famous basketball player and athlete extraordinaire.
Yeah, very well known, I'd say.
Yes.
And it's a great quote, too, by the way. It's very befitting to this episode. But you know, what's amazing to me is how many great quotes come from great basketball players. I was kind of shocked when you were going through them.
Yeah.
Their quotes are really worth checking out if you haven't. They're highly motivational. And this quote is certainly applicable to today's guest.
You know, I have to admit, I'm not someone who follows basketball. But I agree with you. These athletes know how to face challenges and they succeed.
Yeah, they overcome some pretty tough times. So let's bring our guest on.
Okay, well, here we go. Let's listen to Dion Wilson.
Dion, welcome to the Thought Road podcast. I know we're really excited to have another very creative guest, and you definitely are very creative. My friend.
He is.
Very
Hi,
creative.
Dion. So good to have you with us today. I know one of the things.
Hello.
Hi, we're going to be talking about our comic books.
Very exciting.
Yeah.
Hi. Yes. Thank you, Rod and Angie. Thank you very much for having me.
So good to have you. But you know what? Before we started on the interview, we always like to ask our guests what they had for breakfast. So what did you have this morning, Dion?
So this morning I had plain yogurt. I had a little bit of honey to it, a little bit of kale, and tuna. In fact, yeah.
You know, we've heard a couple of people say that about tuna in the morning, and I think that's really a great idea.
It's a power breakfast.
Such a power breakfast because you're loading your brain. What a great idea!
Thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to try that myself.
Yeah.
So, Dion, it's always nice to know. We always like to know where people are originally from and where they grew up. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your history in that area?
Sure. I grew up in a small area called Oakland, California. I grew up in the east part of Oakland, which is known as East Oakland. And that was many years ago.
I had an aunt and uncle. I had an aunt and uncle that lived in Oakland, and that was many years ago. It's a great area, though.
It's changed over the years. It's had its, as an urban environment, obviously it's had its, ups and downs. But I grew up there, and I grew up with my great grandparents, my mom, and my grandmother primarily. So between their 3 homes.
Oh, nice.
That's such a nice environment. You had so much love there from all the family members. That's so cool.
I did. Yes. Thank you. I really did. I learned a lot. And, you kind of take it for granted.
Mm-hmm.
I learned that many of my peers had not been around, or later on, I would say, I learned that many of my peers had not been around their great grandparents. And
Yes.
I grew up knowing my great grandparents, thinking that everybody was around them,
Yeah.
around their great grandparents. And that wasn't the case. So I was very fortunate.
Oh, yeah.
You're so lucky. Yeah.
So you must have a favorite childhood memory, and I suspect it had something to do with comic books.
Yeah. It's a two-parter there. In fact, and I was just mentioning this not long ago. I was really fortunate. The local comic shop, was really just a couple of blocks away from where I lived. So, I would have to pass it on the way to school and the way, home from school.
Mm-hmm.
But I would typically have 1 or 2 days a week that I would stop in after school to, on one of those days, I'd usually look to see what I want to buy, and the other one I would buy comics. And Fridays were, when I was a lot younger, Fridays were really the memory that stands out, because after school on Fridays, I go down to the corner store and, buy, at that time they had these little small paper bags. I don't know what the measurement of it is. It was a small paper bag.
Right.
And it would be filled with candy, just filled with candy.
Oh boy.
And, I'm amazed today that, at my age, I haven't had one cavity. Not one.
Good for you.
I could relate to that candy at that age, believe me.
Oh yeah, man. Yeah. It was just, it was a lot of fun. It was, it was kind of that end of the week reward. You've
Sure.
done all your homework. You're going to watch cartoons on the weekend. And what better way to kick it off than a bag of junk?
I love it. Now, did you have to save up your money and, by doing chores and getting like an allowance, or did your parents say, okay, you've had a great week, here's some cash for you to go buy some candy and comic books? How did that work for you?
Well, this is going to sound really interesting. At that time, I was in elementary school,
Mm-hmm.
and I was about, that was the 5th and 6th grade.
Mm-hmm.
I actually had a job.
Oh, wow. Cool. What did you do?
Yeah. I used to assist the school custodian setting up the auditorium or taking it down after various events, and taking out trash. And he paid us, myself and another friend, he paid us out of his pocket.
Uh-huh.
So it'd be about $5. And I think I spent maybe half of that, or a little more probably, on the candy.
Oh my goodness.
Well, that started you.
What a great job, though.
Yeah, that started you well on your course to become a very successful business person. So you were entrepreneurial even then.
That's so true.
Yeah.
That's so true.
Yeah. I wanted to do it. I didn't care. As a kid, you already have chores taking out the trash.
Yeah.
The only difference is these were big bins. So we got a little bit of help, but we did what we were told. We got in, and it was as you're small, so an auditorium looks huge.
Gosh, yeah.
But you're taking the mop, you're taking the broom.
Mm-hmm.
The chairs will fold up, and you're just getting it done, and it was good. I enjoyed it. I probably enjoyed it too much because you at the end of it, you're standing around, saying, "Hey, I'm ready for that money."
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, you knew the fun stuff was going to come with the money.
The pay was good. So now we're going to jump.
Absolutely.
Now we're going to jump forward.
That's right. So before we get into what you're currently doing, could you share with us a little bit about the time you were with the DoD, which is the Department of Defense?
Right, the U.S. Department of Defense.
Yes.
Yeah, we're really taking a jump. We jumped from elementary and junior high all the way to
right on.
should I talk about that in terms of just just the environment or what got me there? What would you guys like to know?
Perhaps what you actually did there. I think most people don't really understand what the DoD, what personnel in the DoD actually do, or what you specifically did.
Well, I can't tell you what I specifically did, but I can give you I can give you some generalizations to go with. I actually, my first DoD contract, was in Eastern Europe. Over an 11-year period, it was in 3 war zones. So Eastern Europe at that time had calmed down tremendously. But the Iraq War had started up, and I got there, a few months after that started up. And my third contract was in Afghanistan. And so that was over an 11-year period between those 3 places, back and forth in the U.S. too, but primarily overseas. And so I was a part of multiple security elements from the time I started all the way to the time I ended. And they were different based on what area I was in, what companies I worked for that contracted to the DoD, and those assignments that we were a part of. But it was as I was ending my time in Iraq, I got some awards for that. I was really pleased because I don't think I had gotten an award in a while for anything. So that was really great.
I bet.
And even in Afghanistan, some recommendations and awards. So that was really something. When I look back at my time there, I think about how, I wasn't a soldier. Obviously, I was, by some terms, a contractor, by others, employee of contract companies to the DoD. And, although I was into, the idea of going into the military at a young age, I didn't go in. And by the time I was done contracting, I felt a little bit of accomplishment to know that although I had not served, I was able to serve those who did.
Well, I think you were definitely serving the country. I mean, the jobs that you were doing related to security and the operations that you were involved in, I'm sure, were important.
Very
otherwise, you would have been there.
Well, yes, I agree with that. It needed to be significant for me to be there. It really did. There were too many risks going into war zones as a civilian, just as a person in general.
Right.
But I've always felt that I was capable of doing more. And so I really work to, even today, to apply myself as much as I can, just to, really use my human potential, just really push myself.
Well, you know what? I think that you served your country well there. I want to move maybe into what we really want to chat about, and it's related to comics, etc. So we know that you're the founder of Titanium Comics, Raster, and Hero Ledger. Why don't you tell us about those companies that you have founded? This is the exciting part. We're real curious about this.
Okay, so back in 2010, this is actually during the time that I was contracting, I started a independent comic company. And this company I started, I wanted to, I think like a lot of the independent creators, I wanted to do something different. I wanted to tell stories my own way, with characters of my own. And I didn't, jump headfirst into the business. I took time to really research what was going on, because one of the things that I did from elementary throughout junior high, I practiced illustration, and it was actually my goal to become an artist for Marvel.
Mm.
Yes. I think I've only talked about that one other time,
Yeah.
but I got bit by the business bug and decided that, the early evolution of that was, wanting to start my own art studio and start my own comic book company. And that was in high school.
Mm.
Then I left comics behind and decided to get into business after high school. And that's what actually got me to the Department of Defense is I, started a security company after I graduated high school.
Right.
Uh, but, going into the comic area while I'm contracting with the DoD, I decided to, get back into comics. And I started Titanium Comics. I did that for about 5 years with my original partner. And when, about the time that I pivoted the company towards Raster Technologies, I was leaving contracting. So, it was about, halfway into my contracting life that I started the company. And by the time I pivot to Raster, which was about 2015, that was the point where I was done with contracting. I wanted to pursue this environment, with 100% of my time. One of the amazing things that I learned in contracting was, if you can use, that many hours working, sometimes it'd be, 10 days straight, 7 days straight, 12 hours, 15 hours. If you can do that, then what could you accomplish for yourself? And so,
Good point.
the company was built. Yeah, the company was built, and I saw it go on Facebook from, the original 8 followers we had to close to 60,000. And I said, I want to push the limit here again. I want to, do as much as I can. But when I got back to the U.S., I realized that the value proposition just wasn't there. That, akin to a community pool in the summer, it's going to be packed to capacity, right? The hotter it is, everybody wants to get in that pool. And when you look into the environment, which is what I had to do, I found that there were literally over 10,000 comic publishers worldwide, not major publishers, but independent and small groups and individuals. And I just didn't feel that the value proposition was there. I believed that I wanted to make a difference with the company, but I couldn't do that doing the same thing that everybody else was doing.
Yeah.
Right.
So that's when I decided to look at solving problems. And I began to interview my peers from around the world. Fortunately, through Titanium, I built a network of creators around the world at different levels. And I began to ask them questions. And, I found the patterns of the things that were similar, regardless to where those creators were. And there were generally about 3 things that they had in common, with the fourth being an area of expertise, I would say. So they really didn't have the information that they needed. They didn't have the data, the insights. And because of that, they were not really getting the brand recognition, the monetization, and not able to collaborate effectively. And so that's where it was about pivoting to a company that could create some type of a product that would, begin to address those issues.
That's very formidable.
So, yeah.
And that was Raster then?
Yes, that was Raster Technologies. The premise of the technologies part it was trying to understand what would act as a solution. So through my research and my partner at the time that carried over from Titanium Comics, we looked at a number of things. We looked at hardware, we looked at software. We were trying to figure out what would help us to implement these solutions. And at the end of the day, it came to software really being able to have the reach and the range that would meet these type of demands from so many diverse groups, but all having similar issues.
Mm-hmm.
So we decided software, and we decided that we would create applications that would address these issues. And in my early days, not having a software background, not knowing anything about the software development lifecycle, it was it was fun, but it was really sloppy.
Oh, I bet.
Until
we all go through that.
Yeah. Well, there's such a learning curve. I mean, we don't all know every single thing that, there is to know. So, like, it's a struggle, definitely, when you start a new business.
Yeah. Well, I brought in, a really great guy, Samuel Benton, and he's our chief technology officer. And he basically helped to take ideas that were in the cloud and make them readable
Mm-hmm.
and buildable by software developers. And it just seems like from that point forward, as we got into that process, the specific way of getting these things done, more team members came on. I built just an amazing network of unique and experienced professionals on LinkedIn.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, 99% of my networking today is LinkedIn. And so that's been really helpful to our process. We've built, not only Raster, but Multiverse, which is our forward-facing brand. So, even though I was okay with the tech company, I didn't think that the comic creators would really get this idea of tech and comics together. So we wanted to create a brand face there that would be more in line with what they were used to as far as the comics were concerned and the community that surrounds that. And so that's what Multiverse became. And we've been fortunate to, build that side of that side of things that's focused on the community, focused on the user base, focused on the education, and really focused on getting the users onboarded to the software.
Right.
I think we want to kind of move forward a little bit on this and see just exactly these companies that you've created and what they will do for people. I know Angie has a question related to that.
I wanted to know, what was your biggest challenge when you were building the company? I mean, I know that you had a lot to deal with. What was the biggest challenge?
Wow. Biggest challenge. Well, the biggest challenge has always been needing to do more with less resources. And so, you're really required to hanker down when it comes to your education,
right,
and, really getting bold and asking questions, going to people you don't know and trying to get them to give you tips and just some insights and formulate a plan. It's and I consider myself an entrepreneur. I know a lot of people do, but I have
yes, you are
certain biases about, what an entrepreneur is and is not. But, it's a very nonlinear path. When we're in school and you're going to college and you're going to become an accountant, it's literally laid out for you. If you miss those steps, you either need to do something else or you really didn't pay attention, because it's right there for you. But when it comes to building a business, there are just a million different ways that you can get to the goal. And it's really about finding the formula, the methodology that works best for you. And if you have a team, that works best for you and the team, as well as the product and the consumer base that's going to be a part of that experience. So it's just a very nonlinear process, and that can be very difficult, especially with the media. The media is not nice about that.
Yeah.
And I say
No.
that because, I had a huge habit of watching Bloomberg Tech and just Bloomberg in general. It's,
Right.
one of my favorite stations. And the problem is you're hearing about, the success stories. And you're wondering, taking a nonlinear path, you're always wondering, why am I not one of these people on, being interviewed here on this channel about my success? And it's because you haven't gotten there yet. That's it's a big part
or
of it.
they don't. The biggest issue is they don't recognize it, or they don't know about you, and they're not all that inventive. They just look for stories that are pretty easy to put together. They don't dig real deep, or they don't find the innovators, because they end up interviewing the innovators long after they become super successful. They forget about all the trials and tribulations that you certainly have gone through to get to where you are. Why don't you tell us about Hero Ledger? I kind of think that's a cool name.
Such a cool name.
Sure. Okay. So Hero Ledger is our first foray into software technology for the comic book industry. We did not come to Hero Ledger easily. There was a lot of pain, a lot of growing pain. There was a lot of work that went into it. But essentially, Hero Ledger, and it wasn't the first application we created. We actually have two applications. Hero Ledger is the one that we're introducing to the public first. But the purpose was to, again, create applications that would meet the comic creators' goals of monetization, brand recognition, and effective collaboration, our three pillars. And so Hero Ledger actually assists in two of those ways. So there is a tremendous amount of artistic intellectual property that is created by any one artist, writer, graphic designer annually. We did some surveying, and on average, it's about 300 pieces a year. And that's a low average, because the better you are at illustrating or writing, you have even more of these things. But a lot of this work is not seen or monetized. It's just sitting on a shelf. It's typically used to profile the creator to come work for Titanium Comics or Marvel or DC Comics, but it's not used when they get there. So they've used a lot of their skills and a lot of their, time as money to perfect themselves and to sell themselves, but the products themselves never get anywhere. And so there's another side to that. And there's the production time, where you have people who want to create, and add to their productions, but they don't quite know what they want to add. And so we felt that was a great problem solution to be a part of. And Hero Ledger was designed to really meet not only the buy and sell, but help a lot of unused and unmonetized art, unused and unseen art, rather, become monetized. And then on the opposite side of that, for individuals and groups that are trying to put together a comic or a story, they would be able to purchase or license these works in what they're working on. So it would also, make the production time more efficient for those that are, in that process. And so Hero Ledger was really created to do that. And it was also created, another primary purpose for Hero Ledger is really to measure what hasn't been measured. Again, the independent creators aren't really thought about or known about. We can name Spider-Man, we can name, Superman and various commercial characters and storylines, but if I mention some of the independent groups, people won't know who they are typically. And so it's just really important that these brands, have more recognition. It's important that they, get forward. They're not in business, as hobbyists. They really are there to make money. So Hero Ledger was about that.
Yeah, that's really quite brilliant. And I want to make a comment about that. What happens with all creative people, artists, illustrators, writers, whoever, they're practicing their craft and they're basically building content, and then they build a portfolio. They show that portfolio and then people hire them based on that portfolio. But there's some really rich content in that portfolio that you're saying never really sees the light of day. And then probably more importantly, the talent behind it never sees the light of day. We all know Spider-Man, but we really don't know much about who creates it, the illustrators, and the whole process of it ending up in a comic book. And there's so many talented people that are involved in making it a success. And each one of those people rarely, if ever, get any kind of credit for it. So what you're creating is a way for people, creative people in those industries, especially comic book industry, you're creating a mechanism so they can monetize the creations that they have been making all along the way. Is that correct?
That is correct, Rod. That's absolutely correct. You've, maybe we should hire you on.
Well, I think what you're doing is very exciting.
It's
That's
so
why
exciting.
Yinchi and I wanted to have you as a guest, because so many people miss this point. I mean, there's so much more to creativity than most people think about.
Yeah, it's not just only producing the creative product, but there's so much more behind
Well,
that.
you want to monetize it.
You're sitting
on a huge portfolios. I mean, artists have rooms filled with paintings that will never go anywhere.
Absolutely. Let me give you really quickly, when you talk about how much intellectual property is being sat on. Well, as a I consider our company a scale up, not a startup, because we're past 3 years for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But investors and other people in business want to know the numbers. And we took time, actually the first 3 years, to do a lot of digging and surveying and, interviewing to get the insights. And one of the things we recognized as we were finding out about the average, intellectual property creation is the average values. And we're really talking about, if we, just take the lowball numbers there, and we take an average price of about $100 per intellectual property asset, what someone might spend to have that creator create that thing. And that's a very low number. Character might go for $100, but an entire script might go for a couple thousand. But, we used the $100 because there were more pieces that were in that price range than not. And we're really talking about $7 to $10 billion of value annually. So I want to give you context. So a few years back, we know that Disney purchased Marvel Comics for about, I think, 4.3 or 4.5 billion. And same thing for Lucasfilm, right?
Right.
So that was about an $8-9 billion, purchase. Well, if we look at one of those companies, that being Marvel, it literally, you might as well say it took Marvel about, almost 80 years to come to a $4.5 billion value, and Lucasfilm in about half that time. Well, these creators are creating that much value each year.
Mm.
So it's twice. Not twice, but it's either equal to or greater than 7 to 10 billion. What Marvel and Lucasfilms were purchased for, and that purchase only happened one time. It took one company about 40 years. It took the other company about 80 years to come to that value. But the values created in this environment are done each and every year. You see, it's phenomenal, and there's no system to manage that. There's no system to really help these creators get the most out of the kind of unique and just the ecosystem they built for themselves.
Well, they're very inventive. They're very creative, and I'm sure they want to have a reward, financial reward for the effort that they put in. And if they're sitting on all of that creativity, it would certainly be nice if they could turn a profit on it or have it protected.
Absolutely. And that is why we're here. Hero Ledger, again, is the first application, but we are building an entire cloud environment with several applications where data insights, collaboration with new partners, the ability to incentivize your peers as well as your customers and engage them more thoroughly. And sell your products, produce and sell your products. We're creating an environment for that.
I like that.
And so, Hero Ledger is just the first, but it is blockchain enabled, and the system does have a utility token, and they will be able to use that token to, again, incentivize their teams, their consumers. And I would say that adds an additional layer of value that, even the consumers aren't getting these days. I mean, the consumers are very fortunate to have just a ton of products and services that, whether you're a small business or a big business, you're just throwing it at them.
Yeah.
I
have to ask you this because there's so much talk about this. In fact, we even had an episode related to NFTs. But what you're sharing with us sounds like turning comics, books, illustrations, characters, music, etc., into an NFT. Mm-hmm. Is your platform related to that technology at all?
Well, Rod, I'm glad you asked that question. It is not. NFTs, non-fungible tokens. And I want to give some context here, because I know on other shows as well as in the community, in my immediate community, anytime those three letters are raised, everybody, especially on my team, they know I'm going to, here he goes. He's going on his on his talk. But essentially, the focus in the market right now is on the collectability of these items. We're focused on production. We're focused on the long game. The difference is we deal with the files that they use every day. So, they're dealing with image files. They're dealing with audio, video, and text files, essentially, to produce. And, when we look at the comic book producers, they're trying to sell those comics. That's where they're going to make the lion's share of their money. When we look at those, individual artists and writers, they've got to get those scripts and those characters in those books or in some type of visual production. That's how they're going to make their money. With the current use or the current marketing gimmick of NFTs, it's about collectability. It's almost like a lottery. where you might make millions of dollars if, lots of people want to buy that particular representation. And these are representations of the work. What we deal with are the actual works themselves. And we deal with the works where the patron to those works are embedding those works into products that are making their originator and their new producers money. So essentially, if you had a t-shirt company, NG, and you had no you'd had no characters or anything to go on those t-shirts,
right,
you could, through the Hero Ledger marketplace, you could license an available character or image, and maybe that would incentivize your customer to buying that t-shirt more.
You know what? I
You
think
see?
I think Angie's got a really great question
yeah. I
for you
wanted to
right
ask
now.
you. It was kind of going
Exactly
along
about
that line
Exactly.
because
Yeah,
I'm all about
absolutely.
wanting to monetize as much as possible, because that way you're doing the thing that you love and you're bringing joy to other people as well as paying your bills. And it's like, why not, right? So
Absolutely.
I'm thinking about, when you're talking and telling me this, I'm thinking about, if I'm a comic book illustrator, how can your company help me protect my intellectual property, which is important these days? And then what can you do for me
To monetize it and save it.
and help and, further the career here?
Well, that's Angie, that's a really good question. Two good questions. One of the things, also when we talk about NFTs, there's a lot of talk about these products being able to protect intellectual property. And there's even a lot of talk in the general blockchain environment, in the ecosystem about, asset protection, intellectual property protection. But we don't like to go that far, because I think that when we do that, we're stepping on, we're in legal hot water, because what we can do, and I'm going to be as bold as to spread this idea over even the ones who are boasting intellectual property protection in the crypto environment, in the blockchain environment, and other places.
Right.
What we can do, and what is available to us through software, is attestation. Okay, attestation is an attribute of protection, but it is not the end of the road. It's not even the it's not everything. It's just a part of the process of having to prove legally that you are either the originator and owner, or the current owner of a work.
Mm-hmm.
And the attestation part is the system being able to say, as much as we're aware, this individual has, uploaded this unique digital asset to Hero Ledger. They've signed off on, because our system has, in the process of user registration, there's documentation that you have to digitally sign off on, that you have ownership and or control of the assets that you are putting in the marketplace.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And those things being managed by smart contracts, being added to Comic Chain, our blockchain, which hosts Hero Ledger, then those things are associated with you as a user. So now when you get your attorney, whoever your legal advisor is, you now have information to support your claim, but only in a legal court of law, or in some type of, legally administered arbitration, can the decision be made that you do or do not own something. You see,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
it is impossible for us to make such a claim. But what we can do, what software has been doing for a long time, is a date and a timestamp.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah,
And
for sure.
that is one of the important things. There are other parts of that, but there's no proof that when you add an asset, or you add an asset to a platform, that you own that. There's no proof of that.
Well, especially, I mean, interrupt you, but especially in social
No.
media, because there's a lot of social media people that say once you upload one of your assets that they have some claim to it. So right off the bat, you've jeopardized it. There's so many things that you have to share with us, and I don't know we're going to have time to hit it all.
Yeah, unfortunately,
but there's a couple things, so we definitely want to ask you, and then we'll have to definitely have you back on again. But among the many hats that you wear, Dion, you must be an expert at managing all of the elements associated with this type of business, and there are a lot of elements there. How do you keep it all moving forward?
Wow.
I don't know how you do it.
I know.
Yeah.
So many.
Yes, there's a lot of things that I have to read on and understand, but I have to first say there's a lot of things that I could name that I do, but the very first group of people that I have to really give the accolades to are my teams. Without them, there's a lot that I could not do. And when I say my teams, I'm talking about everything from our direct, co-founders and members of Raster, Multiverse, our, associate partnerships, and just business associates, business colleagues that I've known over the years and over this time. They help to really, piece together this process. We don't take what we do lightly. I don't take it lightly. So I know that I have to get smarter people than myself, even though my ego says there's nobody smarter in the room.
Yeah, well, you know what? Every great company has that same kind of leader. You have the people, you surround yourself with people that are smarter than you, but you don't let them know it.
Right. And I take a lot of notes. I mean, I take a profound amount of notes. I have, and I keep those notes. I date timestamp them myself. It's very important for me to do that as a part of, going forward, getting to the goal. And, at the end of the day, like I said, it's a nonlinear process, but
it sounds like it's an exciting one that you're doing. Okay, Angie, leave this great question you have.
Well,
for Dion.
I've been wanting to ask this like the whole show because you're such a creative person, Dion, and I'm always curious. What would be the one thing that you would tell people that want to live a creative life?
Wow. As I think about that, the words of Art Williams comes to mind.
Mm-hmm.
And Art Williams, said, just do it. And, we learned later that Nike, has a similar motto. Whether or not, they had aligned, visions is neither here nor there, but
right.
You need to relax. You need to relax. That's the first thing.
Mm-hmm.
And in that period of quietness that comes with truly relaxing, you need to let go and, do the thing.
Very good. And that's it. Yeah.
I love
that resonates with people that really understand how to be creative because they need to let go. I'm going to ask you this question. I love this question. I've always asked it myself. Every successful creative person tries to be original and authentic, but there are times when we all have self-doubt. I know I do. How do you manage to get through those self-doubt times?
So I have my own version of a Bible, And I'm not by any means downplaying any Holy Scripture.
Mm-hmm.
Those are very, very important too. I keep a journal, and I fill it with motivational sayings that I've learned from others, and I go back over those things. I also have in that same journal my personal accomplishments, and the specific ones where it seemed like I was in the 11th hour and the answer wasn't there, the process wasn't there. It looked like there was a lose that was going to happen.
Yeah.
And I wrote those things down so that I could go back to them and say, hey, if you got through this, you can get through whatever you're going through and whatever comes at you.
Boy,
well,
that's timely for everyone, I think, these days.
For
really.
sure. And you you have the ability to illustrate. So next to those things, you should put a magician pulling a rabbit out of a hat.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. It feels like that sometimes. It does. It does. There are a lot of things to know.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, before we wrap up the show, we always ask our guests this question, and I'm fascinated to find out what you're going to say. So if you could sit on a park bench and chat with anyone from the past, who would it be, Dion?
You're fascinated about the answer to this, NG. So am I, because there are a lot of people. There are a lot of people. I even thought about God really quickly, thinking about this. But you said from the past, so I'm going to just be selfish. I'm going to save myself.
Oh, okay.
I like that answer.
Which self would you want to talk to? The little kid, the teenager,
high school self.
High school self.
Yeah.
So would you advise your high school self?
Absolutely. Interesting. I have to say this. I heard Will Smith actually say that he would do, just the opposite for most of us who said they would go back and tell themselves something. He would go back and ask his younger self, how can he keep taking the kind of risk that he did at that, in his earlier days. Yes. Well, for myself, I'm not as humble as him. I would go back and I would tell myself things. There's a lot of things that I didn't have guidance on. I had to find my own way. People in my family didn't know because they didn't go on this trek. And I would try to give myself some key points about who I am in a deeper sense. Now I probably would try to cheat too on a few stock.
Yes.
When we all
let's see, buy Amazon, buy Apple, right? And all that stuff.
Right. And that self wouldn't have even known what those companies were. But,
right.
Except Apple, but I would really have a conversation about the inner me, who I am deeply, and what it has really meant to the people around me and to the world around me, and what it can mean.
That's very profound. Very profound answer.
A great answer. Very profound. And thank you for sharing that, because it's very insightful.
Yes.
And a lot of us should never ever think about that. We say, I want to be with my grandparents or this famous artist or whatever. But yourself has a lot to tell yourself if you actually listen.
Yeah.
Yeah,
absolutely.
This is, we're running out of time, unfortunately, and you have so much more that we want to ask you about, talk to you about. So we're going to have you on again. But also, I'm glad we had the opportunity to chat with you today. Your vision is one of the best ways of using technology for protecting many people that are creative. It's very exciting what you've been doing and what I know you'll continue to do. And we're going to want to know more about what you have to say. This has been a great
so maybe
interview.
In the future, you can come back on that one.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm glad to have been here with you too.
Yes. So happy you were here with us today. And I know that I need to let our listeners know, if you'd like to know more about Dion, we will have links for him under the show guest tab on thoughtrowpodcast.com. So you can all learn about him and connect with him on social media and check out his website.
Yeah. Also, you can meet Dion and know more about him and what he's doing on LinkedIn. In fact, that's where we met. And we've had a lot of conversations through LinkedIn. And that was one of the reasons why we decided to have Dion on the show. But you can connect with him on LinkedIn right off the bat, and you'll really get to see all that his companies are doing and how beneficial they can be for creative people, and especially people that are in the world of comics and creating comics
right
at all levels, right? Thank you.
Thank you, Dion.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for having me, Rod and Angie.
I'm really glad you tuned in today. We hope you enjoyed the thoughts and ideas we shared with you.
We post a new podcast every week, so remember to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts so you don't miss an episode. Also, if you're enjoying our podcast, both Rod and I would really appreciate you buying us a cup of coffee. Just go to thoughtrow.com, scroll down a bit, and you can find that link right on our website on the homepage.
It's really easy to do, by the way.
Yes, it is.
And all the money we receive goes to our production costs.
Yep.
And primarily because we want to keep our show commercial free, and we want to continue to bring you the best quality content with great guests.
That's right. Thank you for listening to Thought Row Podcast. So it's bye for now from my husband Rod and I, wishing everyone a great day.